the management of the content on your platforms, we need to have better data. Is there any one of you willing to say now that you support this bill? Mr. Chairman, let the record reflect a yawning silence from the leaders of the social media platforms. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Coons. We're on the first of two roll calls, and so please understand if some of the members leave and come back, it's no disrespect. They're doing their job. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tragically, survivors of sexual abuse are often repeatedly victimized and re-victimized over and over and over again by having non-consensual images of themselves on social media platforms. There's a NCMEC study that pointed out there was one instance of CSAM that reappeared more than 490,000 times after it had been reported. So we need tools in order to deal with this. We need, frankly, laws in order to mandate standards so that this doesn't happen, so that we have a systematic way of getting rid of this stuff, because there is literally no plausible justification, no way of defending this. One tool, one that I think would be particularly effective, is a bill that I'll be introducing later today, and I invite all my committee members to join me. It's called the PROTECT Act. The PROTECT Act would, in pertinent part, require websites to verify age and verify that they've received consent of any and all individuals appearing on their site in pornographic images. And it would also require platforms to have meaningful processes for an individual seeking to have images of him or herself removed in a timely manner. Ms. Iacarino, based on your understanding of existing law, what might it take for a person to have those images removed, say from X?
Senator Lee, thank you. It sounds like what you're going to introduce into law in terms of ecosystem-wide and user consent sounds exactly like part of the philosophy of why we're supporting the SHIELD Act, and no one should have to endure non-consensual images being shared online.
Yeah, and without that, without laws in place, and it's fantastic anytime a company, as you've described with yours, wants to take those steps, it's very helpful. It can take a lot longer than it should, and sometimes it does, to the point where somebody had images shared 490,000 times after it was reported to the authorities, and that's deeply concerning. But yes, the PROTECT Act would work in tandem with. It's a good complement to the SHIELD Act. Mr. Zuckerberg, let's turn to you next. As you know, I feel strongly about privacy and believe that one of the best protections for an individual's privacy online involves end-to-end encryption. We also know that a great deal of grooming and sharing of CSAM happens to occur on end-to-end encrypted systems. Tell me, does Meta allow juvenile accounts on its platforms to use encrypted messaging services within those apps?
Sorry, Senator, what do you mean juvenile?
Underage, people under 18.
Under 18. We allow people under the age of 18 to use WhatsApp, and we do allow that to be encrypted, yes.
Do you have a bottom level age at which they're not allowed to use it?
I don't think we allow people under the age of 13.
Yep. What about you, Mr. Citron? On Discord, do you allow kids to have accounts to access encrypted messaging?
Discord is not allowed to be used by children under the age of 13, and we do not use end-to-end encryption for text messages. We believe that it's very important to be able to respond to well-formed law enforcement requests, and we're also working on proactively building technology. We're working with a nonprofit called Thorn to build a grooming classifier so that our Teen Safety Assist feature can actually identify these conversations if they might be happening, so we can intervene and give those teens tools to get out of that situation, or potentially even report those conversations and those people to law enforcement.
And encryption, as much as it can prove useful elsewhere, it can be harmful, especially if you're on a site where you know children are being groomed and exploited. If you allow children onto an end-to-end encryption enabled app, that can prove problematic. Now, let's go back to you for a moment, Mr. Zuckerberg. Instagram recently announced that it's going to restrict all teenagers from access to eating disorder material, suicidal ideation themed material, self-harm content, and that's fantastic. That's great. What's odd, what I'm trying to understand is why it is that Instagram is only restricting, it's restricting access to sexually explicit content, but only for teens ages 13 to 15. Why not restrict it for 16 and 17-year-olds as well?
Senator, my understanding is that we don't allow sexually explicit content on the service for people of any age. How
is that going?
You know, our prevalence metrics suggest that I think it's 99% or so of the content that we remove, we're able to identify automatically using AI systems. So I think that our efforts in this, while they're not perfect, I think are industry leading. The other thing that you asked about was self-harm content, which is what we recently restricted. And we made that shift. I think the state of the science is shifting a bit. Previously, we believed that when people were thinking about self-harm, it was important for them to be able to express that and get support. And now more of the thinking in the field is that it's just better to not show that content at all, which is why we recently moved to restrict that from showing up for those teens at all.
Okay, is there a way for parents to make a request on what their kid can see or not see on your sites?
There are a lot of parental controls. I'm not sure if I don't think that we currently have a control around topics, but we do allow parents to control the time that the children are on the site. And also, a lot of it is based on kind of monitoring and understanding what the teen's experience is, what they're interacting with.
Mr. Citrin, Discord allows pornography on its site. Now, reportedly, 17% of minors who use Discord have had online sexual interactions on your platform, 17%, and 10% have those interactions with someone that the minor believed to be an adult. Do you restrict minors from accessing Discord servers that host pornographic material on them?
Senator, yes, we do restrict minors from accessing content that is marked for adults. Discord also does not recommend content to people. Discord is a chat app. We do not have a feed or an algorithm that boosts content. So we allow adults to share content with other adults in adult-labeled spaces, and we do not allow teens to access that content.
Okay. I see my time's expired. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. We are here in this hearing because as a collective, your platforms really suck at policing themselves. We hear about it here in Congress with fentanyl and other drug dealing facilitated across platforms. We see it and hear about it here in Congress with harassment and bullying that takes place across your platforms. We see it and hear about it here in Congress with respect to child pornography, sexploitation, and blackmail, and we are sick of it. It seems to me that there is a problem with accountability because these conditions continue to persist. In my view, Section 230, which provides immunity from lawsuit, is a very significant part of that problem. If you look at where bullies have been brought to heel recently, whether it's Dominion finally getting justice against Fox News after a long campaign to try to discredit the election equipment manufacturer, or whether it's the moms and dads of the Sandy Hook victims finally getting justice against InfoWars and its campaign of trying to get people to believe that the massacre of their children was a fake put on by them, or even now, more recently, with a writer getting a very significant judgment against Donald Trump after years of bullying and defamation. An honest courtroom has proven to be the place where these things get sorted out. And I'll just describe one case, if I may. It's called Doe versus Twitter. The plaintiff in that case was blackmailed in 2017 for sexually explicit photos and videos of himself, then aged 13 to 14. A compilation video of multiple CSAM videos surfaced on Twitter in 2019. A concerned citizen reported that video on December 25th, 2019, Christmas Day. Twitter took no action. The plaintiff, then a minor in high school in 2019, became aware of this video from his classmates in January of 2020. You're a high school kid, and suddenly there's that. That's a day that's hard to recover from. Ultimately, he became suicidal. He and his parents contacted law enforcement and Twitter to have these videos removed on January 21st and again on January 22nd of 2020, and Twitter ultimately took down the video on January 30th, 2020, once federal law enforcement got involved. That's a pretty foul set of facts. And when the family sued Twitter for all those months of refusing to take down the explicit video of this child, Twitter invoked Section 230. And the district court ruled that the claim was barred. There is nothing about that set of facts that tells me that Section 230 performed any public service in that regard. I would like to see very substantial adjustments to Section 230 so that the honest courtroom, which brought relief and justice to E. Jean Carroll after months of defamation, which brought silence, peace, and justice to the parents of the Sandy Hook children after months of defamation and bullying by InfoWars and Alex Jones, and which brought significant justice and an end to the campaign of defamation by Fox News to a little company that was busy just making election machines. So I would, my time is running out. I'll turn to, I guess Senator Cruz is next. But I would like to have each of your companies put in writing what exemptions from the protection of Section 230 you would be willing to accept, bearing in mind the fact situation in Doe versus Twitter, bearing in mind the enormous harm that was done to that young person and that family by the non-responsiveness of this enormous platform over months and months and months and months. Again, think of what it's like to be a high school kid and have that stuff up in the public domain and have the company that is holding it out there in the public domain react so disinterestedly. Okay? Will you put that down in writing for me? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses. Done. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Social media is a very powerful tool, but we're here because every parent I know, and I think every parent in America, is terrified about the garbage that is directed at our kids. I have 2 teenagers at home, and the phones they have are portals to predators, to viciousness, to bullying, to self-harm. And each of your companies could do a lot more to prevent it. Mr. Zuckerberg, in June of 2023, the Wall Street Journal reported that Instagram's recommendation systems were actively connecting pedophiles to accounts that were advertising the sale of child sexual abuse material. In many cases, those accounts appeared to be run by underage children themselves, often using code words and emojis to advertise illicit material. In other cases, the accounts included indicia that the victim was being sex trafficked. Now, I know that Instagram has a team that works to prevent the abuse and exploitation of children online. But what was particularly concerning about the Wall Street Journal expose was the degree to which Instagram's own algorithm was promoting the discoverability of victims for pedophiles seeking child abuse material. In other words, this material wasn't just living on the dark corners of Instagram. Instagram was helping pedophiles find it by promoting graphic hashtags, including hashtag pedwhore and hashtag preteen sex, to potential buyers. Instagram also displayed the following warning screen to individuals who were searching for child abuse material. These results may contain images of child sexual abuse. And then you gave users 2 choices. Get resources or see results anyway. Mr. Zuckerberg, what the hell were you thinking?
All right, Senator. The basic science behind that is that when people are searching for something that is problematic, it's often helpful to, rather than just blocking it, to help direct them towards something that that could be helpful for getting them to get help.
In what, I understand get resources. In what sane universe is there a link for see results anyway?
Well, because we might be wrong. We try to trigger this warning, or we tried to, when we think that there's any chance that the results.
Okay, you might be wrong. Let me ask you, how many times was this warning screen displayed?
I don't know, but the
you don't know. Why don't you know?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. But
you know what, Mr. Zuckerberg? It's interesting you say you don't know it off the top of your head, because I asked it in June of 2023 in an oversight letter, and your company refused to answer. Will you commit right now to, within 5 days, answering this question for this committee?
We'll follow up on that.
Is that a yes? Not a will follow up. I know how lawyers write statements saying we're not going to answer. Will you tell us how many times this warning screen was displayed? Yes or no?
Senator, I'll personally look into it. I'm not sure if we have.
Okay, so you're refusing to answer that. Let me ask you this. How many times did an Instagram user who got this warning that you're seeing images of child sexual abuse, how many times did that user click on see results anyway? I want to see that.
Senator, I'm not sure if we stored that, but I'll personally look into this and we'll follow up after.
And what follow-up did Instagram do when you have a potential pedophile clicking on, I'd like to see child porn? What did you do next when that happened?
Senator, I think that an important piece of context here is that any context that we think is child sexual
Mr. Zuckerberg,
abuse,
that's called a question. What did you do next when someone clicked, you may be getting child sexual abuse images, and they click, see results anyway? What was your next step? You said you might be wrong. Did anyone examine, was it in fact child sexual abuse material? Did anyone report that user? Did anyone go and try to protect that child? What did you do next?
Senator, we take down anything that we think is sexual abuse material on the service, and we do.
Did anyone
report
verify whether it was in fact child sexual abuse material?
Senator, I don't know if every single search result we're following up on, but
Did you report the people who wanted it?
Senator, do you want me to answer your question?
Yeah, I want you to answer the question I'm asking. Did you report
time to
the
speak, then?
people who click see results anyway?
That's probably one of the factors that we use in reporting. And in general, I mean, we've reported more people and done more reports like this to NCMEC, the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, than any other company in the industry. We proactively go out of our way across our services to do this and have made, I think it's more than 26 million reports, which is more than the whole rest of the industry combined. So,
Mr.
I think that
Zuckerberg,
an
Mr.
allegation
Zuckerberg,
that we
your
that we don't take
company
this
and every
seriously-
social media company needs to do much more to protect children. All right, Mr. Chu, in the next couple of minutes I have, I want to turn to you. You're familiar with China's 2017 National Intelligence Law, which states, quote, all organizations and citizens shall support, assist, and cooperate with national intelligence efforts in accordance with the law and shall protect national intelligence work secrets they are aware of.
Yes, I'm familiar with this.
TikTok is owned by ByteDance. Is ByteDance subject to the law?
For the Chinese businesses that ByteDance owns, yes, it will be subject to this, but TikTok is not available in mainland China. And Senator, as we talked about in your office, we built Project Texas to put this out of reach.
So ByteDance is subject to the law. Now, under this law, which says shall protect national intelligence work secrets they are aware of, it compels people subject to the law to lie, to protect those secrets. Is that correct?
I cannot comment on that. What I said again is that we have moved
because you
it
have
out
to
of reach
protect those
this.
secrets?
No, Senator, TikTok is not available in mainland China. We have moved the data into an American cloud
TikTok
infrastructure.
is controlled by ByteDance, which is subject to this law. Now, you said earlier, and I wrote this down, we have not been asked for any data by the Chinese government, and we have never provided it. I'm going to tell you, and I told this when you and I met last week in my office, I do not believe you. And I'll tell you, the American people don't either. If you look at what is on TikTok in China, you are promoting to kids science and math videos, educational videos, and you limit the amount of time kids can be on TikTok. In the United States, you are promoting to kids self-harm videos and anti-Israel propaganda. Why is there such a dramatic difference?
Senator, that is just not accurate. There's
not a difference between what kids see in China and what kids see here?
Senator, TikTok is not available in China. It's a separate experience there. What I'm saying is...
But you have a company that is essentially the same, except it promotes beneficial materials instead of harmful materials.
That is not true. We have a lot of science and math content here on TikTok. There's so much of it. I created a STEM feed for 100 billion views.
Let me point to this, Mr. Chu. There was a report recently that compared hashtags on Instagram to hashtags on TikTok, and what trended, and the differences were striking. So, for something like hashtag Taylor Swift or hashtag Trump, researchers found roughly 2 Instagram posts for every one on TikTok. That's not a dramatic difference. That difference jumps to 8 to 1 for the hashtag Uyghur. And it jumps to 30 to 1 for the hashtag Tibet. And it jumps to 57 to 1 to the hashtag Tiananmen Square, and it jumps to 174 to 1 for the hashtag Hong Kong protest. Why is it that on Instagram, people can put up a hashtag Hong Kong protest 174 times compared to TikTok. What censorship is TikTok doing at the request of the Chinese government?
None. Senator, that analysis
explain
is
that
flawed.
differential.
The analysis is flawed. It's been debunked by other external sources like the Cato Institute. Fundamentally, a few things happen here. Not all videos carry hashtags. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you cannot selectively choose a few words within a certain time
Why the
period.
difference between Taylor Swift and Tiananmen Square? What happened in Tiananmen Square?
Senator, there was a massive protest during that time. But what I'm trying to say is our users can freely come and post this
Why
content.
would there be no difference on Taylor Swift, or a minimal difference, and a massive difference on Tiananmen Square or Hong Kong?
Senator, could you wrap up, please?
Senator, our algorithm does not suppress any content simply based on
To
this.
answer
It
that
doesn't.
question, why
Yeah.
is there a difference?
Like I said, I think this analysis is flawed. You're selectively choosing some words over some periods. We haven't been around as
There
long
is
as
an
other apps.
obvious difference. 174 to 1 for Hong Kong compared to Taylor Swift is dramatic.
Senator Blumenauer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zuckerberg,
Blumenthal, I'm sorry.
thank you.
I know both of them.
That was good enough. Mr. Zuckerberg, you know who Antigone Davis is, correct?
Yes.
She's one of your top leaders. In September of 2021, she was global head of safety, correct?
Yes.
And you know that she came before a subcommittee of the Commerce Committee that I chaired at the time, Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, correct?
Yes.
And she was testifying on behalf of Facebook, right?
Meta, but yes.
It was then Facebook, but Meta now. And she told us, and I'm quoting, Facebook is committed to building better products for young people and to doing everything we can to protect their privacy, safety, and well-being on our platforms. And she also said, kids' safety is an area where, quote, we are investing heavily, end quote. We now know that statement was untrue. We know it from an internal email that we have received. It's an email written by Nick Clegg. You know who he is, correct?
Yes.
He was Meta's president of global affairs, and he wrote a memo to you, which you received, correct? It was written to you.
So I can't see the email, but sure, I'll assume that you got it that correct.
And he summarized Facebook's problems. He said, quote, we are not on track to succeed for our core well-being topics: problematic use, bullying and harassment, connections, and SSI, meaning suicidal self-injury. He said also in another memo, quote, we need to do more and we are being held back by a lack of investment. This memo has the date of August 28th, just weeks before that testimony from Antigone Davis, correct?
Sorry, Senator, I'm not sure what the date of the testimony was.
Well, those are the dates on the emails. Nick Clegg was asking you, pleading with you for resources to back up the narrative, to fulfill the commitments. In effect, Antigone Davis was making promises that Nick Clegg was trying to fulfill, and you rejected that request for 45 to 84 engineers to do well-being or safety. We know that you rejected it from another memo, Nick Clegg's assistant, Tim Colburn, who said, Nick did email Mark, referring to that earlier email, to emphasize his support for the package, but it lost out to the various other pressures and priorities. We've done a calculation that those potentially 84 engineers would have cost Meta about $50 million in a quarter when it earned $9.2 billion And yet, it failed to make that commitment in real terms, and you rejected that request because of other pressures and priorities. That is an example from your own internal document of failing to act, and it is the reason why we can no longer trust Meta and, frankly, any of the other social media to, in effect, grade their own homework. The public, and particularly the parents in this room, know that we can no longer rely on social media to provide the kind of safeguards that children and parents deserve. And that is the reason why passing the Kids Online Safety Act is so critically important. Mr. Zuckerberg, do you believe that you have a constitutional right to lie to Congress?
Senator, no, but I mean,
Well, let me just clarify for you.
I mean, I'd like the opportunity
Let me
to
just
respond
clarify
to
for
what
you. In a lawsuit brought by hundreds of parents, some in this very room, alleging that you made false and misleading statements concerning the safety of your platform for children, you argued in not just one pleading, but twice, in December and then in January, that you have a constitutional right to lie to Congress. Do you disavow that filing in court?
Senator, I don't know what filing you're talking about, but I testified
filing
honestly
from-
and truthfully, and I would like the opportunity to respond to the previous things that you showed as well.
Well, I have a few more questions, and let me ask others who are here, because I think it's important to put you on record. Who will support the Kids Online Safety Act? Yes or no? Mr. Citrin?
There are parts of the act that we think are great.
No,
and
it's a yes or no question. I'm going to be running out of time, so I'm assuming the answer is no if you can't answer yes.
we very much think that the national privacy
That's a
standard
no.
would be great.
Mr. Siegel?
Senator, we strongly support the Kids Online Safety Act, and we've already implemented many of its core provisions.
Thank you. I welcome that support, along with Microsoft's support. Mr. Chu?
Senator, with some changes, we can support it.
Well, in its present form, do you support it? Yes or no?
We are aware that some groups have raised some concerns. It's important to understand
I'll
how
take
those
that as a
concerns-
no. Ms. Yacarino?
Senator, we support COSA and will continue to make sure that it accelerates and make sure it continues to offer community for teens that are seeking that voice.
Mr. Zuckerberg?
Senator, we support the age-appropriate content standards, but would have some
Yes
suggestions
or no,
on how to
Mr.
implement it.
Zuckerberg? Do you support the Kids Online Safety Act?
Senator, I
It's a
think
measure
these are
that is
nuanced
public,
things.
and I'm just asking whether you'll support it or not.
These are nuanced things. I think that the basic spirit is right. I think the basic ideas in it are right, and there are some ideas that I would debate how to best
Okay,
implement them.
unfortunately, I don't think we can count on social media as a group or big tech to support this measure. And in the past, we know it's been opposed by armies of lawyers and lobbyists. We're prepared for this fight. But I am very, very glad that we have parents here, because tomorrow we're going to have an advocacy day. And the folks who really count, the people in this room who support this measure, are going to be going to their representatives and their senators, and their voices and faces are going to make a difference. Senator Schumer has committed that he will work with me to bring this bill to a vote, and then we will have real protection for children and parents online. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. We have a vote on, as Senator Cotton, have you voted on, and Senator Hawley, you haven't voted yet? You're next. And I don't know how long the vote will be open, but I'll turn over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zuckerberg, let me start with you. Did I hear you say in your opening statement that there's no link between mental health and social media use?
Senator, what I said is I think it's important to look at the science. I know it's people widely talk about this as if that is something that's already been proven. And I think that the bulk of the scientific evidence does not support that.
Well, really, let me just remind you of some of the science from your own company. Instagram studied the effect of your platform on teenagers. Let me just read you some quotes from the Wall Street Journal's report on this. Company researchers found that Instagram is harmful for a sizable percentage of teenagers, most notably teenage girls. Here's a quote from your own study. Quote, "We make body image issues worse for 1 in 3 teen girls." Here's another quote. "Teens blamed Instagram," this is your study, "for increases in the rate of anxiety and depression. This reaction was unprompted and consistent across all groups." That's your study.
Senator, we try to understand the feedback and how people feel about the services. We can improve.
Wait a minute, your own study says that you make life worse for 1 in 3 teenage girls. You increase
Senator, that's not
anxiety
what it
and
says.
depression. That's what it says, and you're here testifying to us in public that there's no link. You've been doing this for years. For years, you've been coming in public and testifying under oath that there's absolutely no link. Your product is wonderful. The science is nascent, full speed ahead, while internally you know full well your product is a disaster for teenagers.
Senator,
and yet
that's
you
not
keep
true.
right on doing what you're doing. Right?
That's not true. That's not true.
Let me show you some other facts I know that you're familiar with. Wait a minute. That's not a question. That's not a question. Those are facts, Mr. Zuckerberg. That's not a question.
Those aren't facts.
Let me show you some more facts. Here's some information from a whistleblower who came before the Senate, testified under oath in public. He worked for you. He's a senior executive. Here's what he showed he found when he studied your products. So, for example, this is girls between the ages of 13 and 15 years old. 37% of them reported that they had been exposed to nudity on the platform unwanted in the last 7 days. 24% said that they had experienced unwanted sexual advances they'd been propositioned in the last 7 days. 17% said they had encountered self-harm content pushed at them in the last 7 days. Now, I know you're familiar with these stats because he sent you an email where he lined it all out. I mean, we've got a copy of it right here. My question is, who did you fire for this? Who got fired because of that?
Senator, we study all of this because it's important and we want to improve our services.
Well, you just told me
And I
a
think
second
that
ago that you studied it, that there was no linkage. Who did you fire?
I said you mischaracterized.
37% of teenage girls between 13 and 15 were exposed to unwanted nudity in a week on Instagram. You knew about it. Who did you fire?
Senator, this is why we're building all
Who
these
did you
different
fire?
tools. Senator, I don't think that's.
Who did you fire?
I'm not going to answer that.
Because you didn't fire anybody, right? You didn't take any significant
I don't think
action.
it's appropriate to talk about like
It's not
individual
appropriate.
HR decisions.
Do you know who's sitting behind you? You've got families from across the nation whose children are either severely harmed or gone, and you don't think it's appropriate to talk about steps that you took? The fact that you didn't fire a single person? Let me ask you this. Have you compensated any of the victims?
Sorry?
Have you compensated any of the victims? These girls, have you compensated them?
I don't believe so.
Why not? Don't you think they deserve some compensation for what your platform has done? Help
Senator,
with counseling services, help with dealing with the issues that your services cause?
Our job is to make sure that we build tools to help keep people safe.
Are you
across
going
our
to
platform.
compensate them?
Senator, our job and what we take seriously is making sure that we build industry-leading tools to find harmful
make
content,
money.
take it off the services,
To make money.
and to build tools that empower parents.
So you
that
didn't
help
take
more
any
people.
action. You didn't
That's
take
not
any
true,
action.
Senator.
You didn't fire anybody. You haven't
not true.
compensated a
That's
single
not-
victim.
that's
Let
not
me
what I
ask you
said.
this. Let me ask you this. There's families of victims here today. Have you apologized to the victims? Would you like to do so now?
Well-
They're here. You're on national television. Would you like now to apologize to the victims who have been harmed by your product? Show them the pictures. Would you like to apologize for what you've done to these good people?
I'm sorry for everything that you have all gone through. It's terrible. No one should have to go through the things that your families have suffered. And this is why we invest so much and are going to continue doing industry-leading efforts to make sure that no one has to go through the types of things that your families have had to suffer.
You know, why, Mr. Zuckerberg, why should your company not be sued for this? Why is it that you can claim, you hide behind a liability shield, you can't be held accountable? Shouldn't you be held accountable personally? Will you take personal responsibility?
Senator, I think I've already answered this. I mean, these
Well,
are
try
serious
this again.
issues.
Will you take personal responsibility?
Senator, I view my job and the job of our company as building the best tools that we can to keep our community safe.
Well, you're failing at
and
that.
Well, Senator, we're doing an industry-leading effort. We build AI tools
nonsense. Your product is killing people. Will you personally commit to compensating the victims? You're a billionaire. Will you commit to compensating the victims? Will you set up a compensation fund
Senator,
with your
I
money?
think these are
With your money.
complicated- Senator, these are complicated
Yes, no,
issues.
that's not a complicated question, though. That's a
Senator,
yes or no.
this is-
Will you set up a victims compensation fund with your money, the money you made on these families sitting behind you? Yes or no?
Senator, I don't think that's my job is to
Sounds
make
like
sure
a
we build
no.
good tools. My
Sounds
job
like a
is
no.
to make sure that
Your job is to be responsible for what your company has done. You've made billions of dollars on the people sitting behind them. Are you here? You've done nothing to help them. You've done nothing to compensate them. You've done nothing to put it right. You could do so here today, and you should. You should, Mr. Zuckerberg. Before my time expires, Mr. Chu, let me just ask you, your platform, why should your platform not be banned in the United States of America? You are owned by a Chinese communist company or a company based in China. The editor-in-chief of your parent company is a Communist Party secretary. Your company has been surveilling Americans for years. According to leaked audio from more than 80 internal TikTok meetings, China-based employees of your company have repeatedly accessed non-public data of United States citizens. Your company has tracked journalists improperly gaining access to their IP addresses, user data, in an attempt to identify whether they're writing negative stories about you. Why should your platform is basically an espionage arm for the Chinese Communist Party? Why should you not be banned in the United States of America?
Senator, I disagree with your characterization. Many of what you have said, we have explained in a lot of detail. TikTok is used by 170 million Americans.
I know, and every single
love.
one of those Americans are in danger from the fact that you track their keystrokes, you track their app usage, you track their location data, and we know that all of that information can be accessed by Chinese employees who are subject to the dictates of the Chinese Communist Party. Why should you not be banned in this country?
Senator, that is not accurate. A lot of what you describe we collect, we don't.
It is 100% accurate. Do you deny that repeatedly Americans' data has been accessed by ByteDance employees in China?
We built a project that cost us billions of dollars to stop that, and we have made a lot of progress.
And it hasn't been stopped. According to the Wall Street Journal report from just yesterday, even now, ByteDance workers, without going through official channels, have access to the private information of American citizens. I'm quoting from the article, private information of American citizens, including their birth date, their IP address, and more. That's now.
Senator, as we know, the media doesn't always get it right. What we have.
But the Chinese Communist Party does?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we've spent billions of dollars to build this project. It's rigorous, it's robust, it's unprecedented, and I'm proud of the work that the 2,000 employees are doing to protect the data.
But it's not protected. That's the problem, Mr. Chu. It's not protected at all. It's subject to Communist Chinese Party inspection and review. Your app, unlike anybody else sitting here, and heaven knows I've got problems with everybody here, but your app, unlike any of those, is subject to the control and inspection of a foreign hostile government that has actively trying to track the information of whereabouts of every American that they get their hands on. Your app ought to be banned in the United States of America for the security of this country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we've heard, children face all sorts of dangers when they use social media, from mental health harms to sexual exploitation, even trafficking. Sex trafficking is a serious problem in my home state of Hawaii, especially for Native Hawaiian victims. That social media platforms are being used to facilitate this trafficking, as well as the creation and distribution of C-scam is deeply concerning, but it's happening. For example, Several years ago, a military police officer stationed in Hawaii was sentenced to 15 years in prison for producing C-scam as part of his online exploitation of a minor female. He began communicating with this 12-year-old girl through Instagram. He then used Snapchat to send her sexually explicit photos and to solicit such photos from her. He later used these photos to blackmail her. And just last month, the FBI arrested a neo-Nazi cult leader in Hawaii who lured victims to his Discord server. He used that server to share images of extremely disturbing child sexual abuse material interspersed with neo-Nazi imagery. Members of his child exploitation and hate group are also present on Instagram, Snapchat, X, and TikTok, all of which they use to recruit potential members and victims. In many cases, including the ones I just mentioned, your companies played a role in helping law enforcement investigate these offenders. But by the time of the investigation, so much damage had already been done. This hearing is about how to keep children safe online, and we've listened to all of your testimony, to seemingly impressive safeguards for young users. You try to limit the time that they spend. You require parental consent. You have all of these tools. Yet, trafficking and exploitation of minors online and on your platforms continues to be rampant. Nearly all of your companies make your money through advertising, specifically by selling the attention of your users. Your product is your users. As a Meta product designer wrote in an email, quote, "Young ones are the best ones. You want to bring people to your service young and early," end quote. In other words, hook them early. Research published last month by Harvard School of Public Health estimates that Snap makes an astounding 41% of its revenues by addressing to users under 18. With TikTok, it's 35%. 7 of the 10 largest Discord servers, attracting many paying users, are for games used primarily by teens, by children. All this is to say that social media companies, yours and others, make money by attracting kids to your platforms. But ensuring safety doesn't make money, it costs money. If you are going to continue to attract kids to your platforms, you have an obligation to ensure they are safe on the platforms, because the current situation is untenable. That is why we're having this hearing. But to ensure safety for our children, that costs money. Your companies cannot continue to profit off young users, only to look the other way when those users, our children, are harmed online. We've had a lot of comments about Section 230 protections. And I think we are definitely heading in that direction. And some of the 5 bills that we have already passed out of this committee talks about limiting the liability protections for you. Last November, this is for Mr. Zuckerberg. Last November, the Privacy Technology Subcommittee heard testimony from Arturo Bejar in response to one of my questions about how to ensure that social media companies focus more on child safety. He said, and I am paraphrasing a little bit. Mr. Bejar said, what will change their behavior is at the moment that Mark Zuckerberg declares earnings, and these earnings have to be declared to the SEC. So he has to say, last quarter we made $34 billion, and the next thing he has to say is how many teens experienced unwanted sexual advances on his platform. Mr. Zuckerberg, will you commit to reporting measurable child safety data on your quarterly earnings reports and calls?
Senator, it's a good question. We actually already have a quarterly report that we issue and do a call to answer questions for how we're enforcing our community standards. That includes not just the child safety issues and metrics.
So is that a yes?
We have a separate call that we do this on, but we've led
But I
the
think
industry.
that you have to report your earnings to the SEC. Will you report to them this kind of data, and by numbers, by the way, because Senator Coons said, and others have said, percentages don't really tell the full story. Will you report to the SEC the number of teens, and sometimes you don't even know whether they're teens or not because they just claim to be adults. Will you report the number of underage children on your platforms who experience unwanted CSAM and other kinds of messaging that harm them? Will you commit to citing those numbers to the SEC when you make your quarterly report?
Well, Senator, I'm not sure it would make as much sense to include it in the SEC filing, but we file it publicly so that way everyone can see this. And I'd be happy to follow up and talk about what specific metrics. I think the specific things that some of the ones that you just mentioned around underage people on our services, we don't allow people under the age of 13 on our service. So if we find anyone who's under the age of 13, we remove them from our service. Now, I'm not saying that people don't lie and that there aren't anyone who's under the age of 13 who's using it, but we're not going to be able to count how many people there are, because fundamentally, if we identify that someone is underage, we remove them from the service.
I think that's really important that we get actual numbers, because these are real human beings. That's why all these parents and others are here, because each time that a young person is exposed to this kind of unwanted material and they get hooked, it is a danger to that individual. So I'm hoping that you are saying that you do report this kind of information to, if not the SEC, that it is made public. I think I'm hearing that, yes, you do. So.
Yes, Senator, I think we report more publicly on our enforcement than any other company in the industry. And we're very supportive of transparency measures.
I am running out of time, Mr. Zuckerberg, but so I will follow up with what exactly it is that you do report. Again, for you, when Meta automatically places young people's accounts, and you testified to this, on the most restrictive privacy and content sensitivity sessions, and yet teens are able to opt out of these safeguards. Isn't that right? It's not mandatory that they remain on these settings. They can opt out.
Senator, yes, we default teens into a private account so that they have a private and restricted experience, but some teens want to be creators and want to have content that they share more broadly, and I don't think that that's something that should just blanketly be banned.
Why not? I think it should be mandatory that they remain on the more restrictive settings.
Senator, I think that there's a lot of teens create amazing things, and I think with the right supervision and parenting and controls, I think that that's I don't think that that's the type of thing that you want to just not allow anyone to be able to do. I think you want to make it so that
my time is up, but I have to say that there is an argument that you all make for every single thing that we are proposing, and I share the concern that I have about the blanket limitation on liabilities that we provide all of you, and I think that has to change, and that is on us, on Congress, to make that change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rono. Senator Cotton.
Mr. Chu, let's cut straight to the chase. Is TikTok under the influence of the Chinese Communist Party?
No, Senator, we are a private business.
Okay, so you can see that your parent, ByteDance, is subject to the 2017 national security law, which requires Chinese companies to turn over information to the Chinese government and conceal it from the rest of the world. You concede that, correct?
Senator, the Chinese
That's no question. You conceded it early.
Any company that does, any global business that does business in China has to follow their local laws.
Isn't it the case that ByteDance also has an internal Chinese Communist Party committee?
Like I said, all businesses that operate in China have to follow their local law.
So your parent company is subject to the national security law that requires it to answer to the party. It has its own internal Chinese Communist Party committee. You answer to that parent company, but you expect us to believe that you're not under the influence of the Chinese Communist Party?
I understand this concern, Senator, which is why we built Project Texas.
It was a yes or no question. Okay. Well, you used to work for ByteDance, didn't you? You were the CFO for ByteDance?
That is correct, Senator.
In April 2021, while you were the CFO, the Chinese Communist Party's China Internet Investment Fund purchased a 1% stake in ByteDance's main Chinese subsidiary, the ByteDance Technology Company. In return for that so-called 1% golden share, the party took one of 3 board seats at that subsidiary company. That's correct, isn't it?
It's for the Chinese business.
Is that correct?
It's for the Chinese business, yes.
That deal was finalized on April 30th, 2021. Isn't it true that you were appointed the CEO of TikTok the very next day on May 1, 2021?
Well, it's a coincidence.
It's a coincidence that
It
you were
is.
the CFO,
Senator,
that
it
the
is.
Chinese Communist Party took its golden share in its board seat, and the very next day you were appointed the CEO of TikTok? That's a hell of a coincidence.
It really is, Senator.
Yeah, it is. Okay. And before ByteDance, you were at a Chinese company called Xiaomi, is that correct?
Yes, I used to work around the world.
Where did you live when you worked at Xiaomi?
I lived in China, like many expats.
Where exactly?
In Beijing, in China.
How many years did you live in Beijing?
Senator, I worked there for about 5 years.
So you lived there for 5 years?
Yes.
Isn't it the case that Xiaomi was sanctioned by the United States government in 2021 for being a communist Chinese military company?
I'm here to talk about TikTok. I think they then had a lawsuit and it was overturned. I can't remember the details.
No,
it's another
it was
company.
the Biden administration that reversed those sanctions, just like, by the way, they reversed the terrorist designation on the Houthis in Yemen. How's that working out for them? But it was sanctioned as a Chinese communist military company. So you said today, as you often say, that you live in Singapore. Of what nation are you a citizen?
Singapore.
Are you a citizen of any other nation?
No, Senator.
Have you ever applied for Chinese citizenship?
Senator, I served my nation in
asking-
Singapore. No, I did not.
Do you have a Singaporean passport?
Yes, and I served my military for two and a half years in
Do you
Singapore.
have any other passports from any other nations?
No, Senator.
Your wife is an American citizen. Your children are American citizens.
That's correct.
Have you ever applied for American citizenship?
No, not yet.
Okay. Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean. No.
Have you ever been associated or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party?
No, Senator. Again, I'm
Okay.
Singaporean.
Let me ask you some hopefully simple questions. You said earlier, in response to a question, that what happened at Tiananmen Square in June of 1989 was a massive protest. Did anything else happen in Tiananmen Square?
Yes, I think it's well documented. There was a massacre.
There was
yeah.
the indiscriminate slaughter of hundreds or thousands of Chinese citizens. Do you agree with the Trump administration and the Biden administration that the Chinese government is committing genocide against the Uyghur people?
Senator, I've said this before. I think it's really important that anyone who cares about this topic or any topic can freely express themselves on TikTok.
It's a very simple question that unites both parties in our country and governments around the world. Is the Chinese government committing genocide against the Uyghur people?
Senator, anyone, including, you can come into TikTok and talk about this topic
I'm asking you,
or
yes
any
or no.
topic
You
that
are a
matters to you.
worldly, cosmopolitan, well-educated man who's expressed many opinions on many topics. Is the Chinese government committing genocide against the Uyghur people?
Actually, Senator, I talk mainly about my company, and I'm here to talk about what
yes or
TikTok
no?
does.
Yes or no? You're here to give testimony that's truthful and honest and complete. Let me ask you this. Joe Biden last year said that Xi Jinping was a dictator. Do you agree with Joe Biden? Is Xi Jinping a dictator?
Senator, I'm not going to comment on any world leaders.
Why won't you answer these very simple questions?
Senator, it's not appropriate for
Are you
me as a
scared?
businessman to comment on world leaders.
Are you scared that you'll lose your job if you say anything negative about the Chinese Communist Party?
I disagree that. You will
Are you
find
scared
content
you'll
that
be
is critical of
arrested
China
and
on our
disappear
platform.
The next time you go on, are you scared that you'll be arrested and disappear the next time you go to mainland China?
Senator, you will find content that's critical of China and any
All right.
other country freely on TikTok.
Okay. Let's turn to what TikTok, a tool of the Chinese Communist Party, is doing to America's youth. Does the name Mason Edens ring a bell?
Senator, you may have to give me more specifics if you don't mind.
Yeah, he was a 16-year-old Arkansan. After a breakup in 2022, he went on your platform and searched for things like inspirational quotes and positive affirmations. Instead, he was served up numerous videos glamorizing suicide until he killed himself by gun. What about the name Chase Nazca? Does that ring a bell?
Would you mind giving me more details, please?
He was a 16-year-old who saw more than 1,000 videos on your platform about violence and suicide until he took his own life by stepping in front of a plane or train. Are you aware that his parents, Dean and Michelle, are suing TikTok and ByteDance for pushing their son to take his own life?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Okay. Finally, Mr. Chu, has the Federal Trade Commission sued TikTok during the Biden administration?
Senator, I cannot talk about whether there's any
Are
ongoing...
you currently being sued by the Federal Trade Commission?
Senator, I cannot talk about any potential lawsuits,
I didn't
whether
say
they happen or
potential,
not.
actual. Are you being sued by the Federal Trade Commission?
Senator, I think I've given you my answer. I
The
cannot
answer
talk
is
about.
no. Ms. Yacarino's company is being sued, I believe, Mr. Zuckerberg's company is being sued, I believe, yet TikTok, the agent of the Chinese Communist Party, is not being sued by the Biden administration. Are you familiar with the name Christina Kafara?
You may have to give me more details.
Christina
Senator.
Kafara was a paid advisor to ByteDance, your communist-influenced parent company. She was then hired by the Biden FTC to advise on how to sue Mr. Zuckerberg's company.
Senator, ByteDance is a global company and not a Chinese Communist company. It's owned by global investors.
Public reports indicate that your lobbyist visited the White House more than 40 times in 2022. How many times did your company's lobbyist visit the White House last year?
I don't know that, Senator.
Are you aware that the Biden campaign and the Democratic National Committee is on your platform? They have TikTok accounts?
Senator, we encourage people to come on
Which,
to
by
create
the way,
organic, authentic content.
they won't let their staffers use their personal phones. They give them separate phones that they only use TikTok on.
We encourage everyone to join, including yourself, Senator.
So all these companies are being sued by the FTC. You're not. The FTC has a former paid advisor, your parent, talking about how they can sue Mr. Zuckerberg's company. Joe Biden's reelection campaign, the Democratic National Committee, is on your platform. Let me ask you, have you or anyone else at TikTok communicated with or coordinated with the Biden administration, the Biden campaign, or the Democratic National Committee to influence the flow of information on your platform?
We work with any creators who want to use our campaign. It's all the same process that we have.
So what we have here, we have a company that's a tool of the Chinese Communist Party that is poisoning the minds of America's children, in some cases driving them to suicide, and that at best the Biden administration is taking a pass on, at worst maybe in collaboration with. Thank you, Mr. Chu.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. So we're going to take a break now. We're on the second roll call. Members can take advantage of it if they wish. The break will last about 10 minutes. Please do your best to return.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, as we reconvene, I'm proud once again to share that I am one of the few senators with younger children. And I lead with that because as we are having this conversation today, it's not lost on me that between my children, who are all now in the teen and preteen category, and their friends, I see this issue very up close and personal. And in that spirit, I want to take a second to just acknowledge and thank all the parents who are in the audience today, many of whom have shared their stories with our offices, and I credit them for finding strength through their suffering, through their struggle, and channeling that into the advocacy that is making a difference. I thank all of you. Now, I appreciate, again, personally, the challenges that parents and caretakers, school personnel, and others face in helping our young people navigate this world of social media and technology in general. Now, the services our children are growing up with provide them unrivaled access to information. I mean, this is beyond what previous generations have experienced. And that includes learning opportunities, socialization, and much, much more. But we also clearly have a lot of work to do to better protect our children from the predators and predatory behavior that these technologies have enabled. And yes, Mr. Zuckerberg, that includes exacerbating the mental health crisis in America. Nearly all teens, we know, have access to smartphones and the internet and use the internet daily. And while guardians do have primary responsibility for caring for our children, the old adage says it takes a village. And so society as a whole, including leaders in the tech industry, must prioritize the health and safety of our children. Now, dive into my questions now and be specific, platform by platform, witness by witness, on the topic of some of the parental tools you have each made reference to. Mr. Citron, how many minors are on Discord, and how many of them have caretakers that have adopted your family center tool? And if you don't have the numbers, just say that quickly and provide that to our office.
We can follow up with you on that.
How have you ensured that young people and their guardians are aware of the tools that you offer?
We make it very clear to teens on our platform what tools are available, and our Teen Safety Assist is enabled by default.
What specifically do you do? What may be clear to you is not clear to the general public. So what do you do, in your opinion, to make it very clear?
So our Teen Safety Assist, which is a feature that helps teens keep themselves safe, in addition to blocking and blurring images that may be sent to them, that is on by default for teen accounts, and it cannot be turned off. We also have, we market and to our teen users directly on our platform. We launched our Family Center. We created a promotional video. We put it directly on our product. So when every teen opened the app, in fact, every user opened the app, they got an alert like, hey, Discord has this, they want you to use it.
Thank you. Look forward to the data that we're requesting from Mr. Zuckerberg. Across all of Meta services, from Instagram, Facebook, Messenger, and Horizon, how many minors use your applications? And of those minors, how many have a caretaker that has adopted the parental supervision tools that you offer?
Sorry, I can follow up with the specific stats on that.
Okay, it would be very helpful, not just for us to know, but for you to know as the leader of your company. And how, same question, how are you ensuring that young people and their guardians are aware of the tools that you offer?
We run pretty extensive ad campaigns, both on our platforms and outside. We work with creators and organizations like Girl Scouts to make sure that this is broadly, that there's broad awareness of the tools.
Okay. Mr. Spiegel, how many minors use Snapchat? And of those minors, how many have caretakers that are registered with your family center?
Senator, I believe approximately, in the United States, there are approximately 20 million teenage users of Snapchat. I believe approximately 200,000 parents use Family Center, and about 400,000 teens have linked their account to their parents using Family Center.
So 200,000, 400,000 sounds like a big number, but small in percentage of the minors using Snapchat. What are you doing to ensure that young people and their guardians are aware of the tools you offer?
Senator, we create a banner for Family Center on the user's profiles so that accounts we believe may be of the age that they could be parents can see the entry point into Family Center easily.
Okay. Mr. Chu, how many minors are on TikTok, and how many of them have a caregiver that uses your family tools?
Senator, I need to get back to you on the specific numbers, but we were one of the first platforms to give what we call family pairing to parents. You go to settings, you turn on the QR code, your teenager's QR code and yours, you scan it. And what it allows you to do is you can set screen time limits, you can filter out some keywords, you can turn on a more restricted mode. And we're always talking to parents. I met a group of parents and teenagers and high school teachers last week to talk about what more we can provide in the family pairing mode.
Ms. Yacarino, how many minors use X, and are you planning to implement safety measures or guidance for caretakers like your peer companies have?
Thank you, Senator. Less than 1% of all U.S. users are between the ages of 13 and 17.
Less than 1% of how many?
Of 90 million U.S. users.
Okay, so still hundreds of thousands. Continue.
Yes, yes, and every single one is very important. Being a 14-month-old company, we have reprioritized child protection and safety measures, and we have just begun to talk about and discuss how we can enhance those with parental controls.
Let me continue with a follow-up question for Mr. Citron. In addition to keeping parents informed about the nature of various internet services, there's a lot more we obviously need to do. For today's purposes, while many companies offer a broad range of quote-unquote user empowerment tools, it's helpful to understand whether young people even find these tools helpful. So appreciate you sharing your Teen Safety Assist and the tools and how you're advertising it, but have you conducted any assessment of how these features are impacting minors' use of your platform?
Our intention is to give teens tools, capabilities that they can use to keep themselves safe, and also so our teams can help keep teens safe. We recently launched Teen Safety Assist last year, and I do not have a study off the top of my head, but we'd be happy to follow up with you on that.
Okay. My time is up. I'll have follow-up questions for each of you, either in the second round or through statements for the record on a similar assessment of the tools that you've proposed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you all for being here. Mr. Spiegel, I see you hiding down there. Stand are going to be like putting paint on rotten wood. And I'm not sure you're going to support this legislation. I'm not. The fact is that you and some of your internet colleagues who are not here are no longer, you're not companies, you're countries. You're very, very powerful. And you and some of your colleagues who are not here have blocked everything we have tried to do in terms of reasonable regulation. Everything from privacy to child exploitation. And in fact, we have a new definition of recession. A recession is when, we know we're in a recession when Google has to lay off 25 members of Congress. That's what we're down to. We're also down to this fact that your platforms are hurting children. I'm not saying they're not doing some good things, but they're hurting children. And I know how to count votes, and if this bill comes to the floor of the United States Senate, it will pass. What we're going to have to do, and I say this with all the respect I can muster, is convince my good friend Senator Schumer to go to Amazon, buy a spine online, and bring this bill to the Senate floor. And the House will then pass it. Now, that's one person's opinion. I may be wrong, but I doubt it. Mr. Zuckerberg, let me ask you a couple of questions. I might wax a little philosophical here. I have to hand it to you. You have convinced over 2 billion people to give up all of their personal information, every bit of it, in exchange for getting to see what their high school friends had for dinner Saturday night. That's pretty much your business model, isn't it?
It's not how I would characterize it. And we give people the ability to connect with the people they care about and to engage with the topics that they care about.
And you take this information, this abundance of personal information, and then you develop algorithms to punch people's hot buttons, and send and steer to them information that punches their hot buttons again and again and again to keep them coming back and to keep them staying longer. And as a result, your users see only one side of an issue. And so, to some extent, your platform has become a killing field for the truth, hasn't it?
I mean, Senator, I disagree with that characterization. We build ranking and recommendations because people have a lot of friends and a lot of interests, and they want to make sure that they see the content that's relevant to them. We're trying to make a product that's useful to people and make our services as helpful as possible for people to connect with the people they care about and the interests they care about.
But you don't
That's what we
show
do.
them both sides. You don't give them balanced information. You just keep punching their hot buttons, punching their hot buttons. You don't show them balanced information so people can discern the truth for themselves. And you rev them up so much that so often your platform and others becomes just cesspools of snark where nobody learns anything, don't they?
Well, Senator, I disagree with that. I think people can engage in the things that they're interested in and learn quite a bit about those. We have done a handful of different experiments and things in the past around news and trying to show content on a diverse set of perspectives. I think that there's more that needs to be explored there, but I don't think that we can solve that by ourselves. One of the things that I saw...
I'm sorry to cut you off, Mr. President, but I'm going to run out of time. Do you think your users really understand what they're giving to you, all of their personal information, and how you process it and how you monetize it? Do you think people really understand?
Senator, I think people understand the basic terms. I mean, I think that there's... I actually think that a lot of people overestimate how much information
It's been a
there is
couple
that
of
we
years
have.
since we talked about this. Does your user agreement still suck?
I'm not sure how to answer that, Senator.
Can you still hide a dead body and all that legalese where nobody can find it?
Senator, I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, but I think people get the basic deal of using these services. It's a free service. You're using it to connect with the people you care about. If you share something with people, other people will be able to see your information. It's inherently, if you're putting something out there to be shared publicly or with a private set of people, it's, you're inherently putting it out there. So I think people get that basic part of how the service works.
But Mr. Zuckerberg, you're in the foothills of creepy. You track people who aren't even Facebook users. You track your own people, your own users who are your product, even when they're not on Facebook. I'm going to land this plane pretty quickly, Mr. Chairman. I mean, it's creepy. And I understand you make a lot of money doing it, but I just wonder if our technology is greater than our humanity. I mean, let me ask you this final question. Instagram is harmful to young people, isn't it?
Senator, I disagree with that. That's not what the research shows on balance. That doesn't mean that individual people don't have issues and that there aren't things that we need to do to help provide the right tools for people. But across all of the research that we've done internally, I mean, the survey that the senator previously cited, there are 12 or 15 different categories of harm that we asked teens if they felt that Instagram made it worse or better. And across all of them, except for the one that Senator Hawley cited, more people said that using Instagram made
I've
the
got to
different
land
issues
this
that they
plane,
face,
Mr. Zuckerberg.
either positive or...
We just have to agree to disagree. If you believe that Instagram, I'm not saying it's intentional, but if you agree that Instagram, if you think that Instagram is not hurting millions of our young people, particularly young teens, particularly young women, you shouldn't be driving. It is. Thanks.
Senator Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our panelists who've come to have an important conversation with us. Most importantly, I want to appreciate the families who have shown up to continue to be remarkable champions of your children and your loved ones, for being here, and in particular to California families that I was able to just talk to on the break, the families of Sammy Chapman from Los Angeles and Daniel Puerta from Santa Clarita. They are here today and are doing some incredible work to not just protect the memory and legacy of their boys, but the work that they're doing is going to protect my 9-year-old. And that is indeed why we're here. There are a couple questions that I want to ask some individuals. Let me start with a question for each of you. Mr. Citron, have you ever sat with a family and talked about their experience and what they need from your product? Yes or no?
Yes, I have spoken with parents about how we can build tools to help them.
Mr. Spiegel, have you sat with families and young people to talk about your products and what they need from your product?
Yes, Senator.
Mr. Hsu?
Yes, I just did it 2 weeks ago, for example.
I don't want to know what you did for the hearing prep, Mr. Chu. I just wanted to know if you did anything
Senator,
in terms of designing the product that you are creating. Mr. Zuckerberg, have you sat with parents and young people to talk about how you design product for your consumers?
Yes, over the years, I've had a lot of conversations with parents.
You know, that's interesting, Mr. Zuckerberg, because we talked about this last night and you gave me a very different answer. I asked you this very question.
Well, I told you that I didn't know what specific processes our company had.
No, Mr.
for
Zuckerberg,
answering.
you said to me that you had not.
I must have misspoke.
I want to give you the room to misspeak, Mr. Zuckerberg, but I asked you this very question. I asked all of you this question, and you told me a very different answer when we spoke, but I won't belabor it. Can I, a number of you have talked about Ms. Giacarino, have you talked to parents directly, young people, about designing your product?
As a new leader of X, the answer is yes. I've spoken to them about the behavioral patterns because less than 1% of our users are in that age group, but yes, I have spoken to them.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Spiegel, there are a number of parents whose children have been able to access illegal drugs on your platform. What do you say to those parents?
Senator, we are devastated that we cannot.
To the parents, what do you say to those parents, Mr. Spiegel?
I'm so sorry that we have not been able to prevent these tragedies. We work very hard to block all search terms related to drugs from our platform. We proactively look for and detect drug-related content. We remove it from our platform, preserve it as evidence, and then we refer it to law enforcement for action. We've worked together with nonprofits and with families on education campaigns because the scale of the fentanyl epidemic is extraordinary. Over 100,000 people lost their lives last year, and we believe people need to know that one pill can kill. That campaign reached was viewed more than 260 million times on Snapchat. We also
Mr. Spiegel, there are two fathers in this room who lost their sons. They're 16 years old. Their children were able to get those pills from Snapchat. I know that there are statistics and I know that there are good efforts. None of those efforts are keeping our kids from getting access to those drugs on your platform. As a California company, all of you, I've talked with you about what it means to be a good neighbor and what California families and American families should be expecting from you. You owe them more than just a set of statistics. And I look forward to you showing up on all pieces of this legislation, all of you, showing up on all pieces of legislation to keep our children safe. Mr. Zuckerberg, I want to come back to you. I talked with you about being a parent to a young child who doesn't have a phone, is not on social media at all. And one of the things that I am deeply concerned with as a parent to a young Black girl is the utilization of filters on your platform that would suggest to young girls utilizing your platform the evidence that they are not good enough as they are. I want to ask more specifically and refer to some unredacted court documents that reveal that your own researchers concluded that these face filters that mimic plastic surgery negatively impact youth mental health indeed, and well-being. Why should we believe that because that you're going to do more to protect young women and young girls when it is that you give them the tools to affirm the self-hate that is spewed across your platforms? Why is it that we should believe that you are committed to doing anything more to keep our
People use face filters and different tools to make media and photos and videos that are fun or interesting across a lot of the different products that are
plastic surgery pens are good tools to express?
Senator, I'm not speaking to that
Skin lightening
specifically.
tools are tools
Senator,
to express creativity. This is the direct thing that I'm asking
I'm not
about.
defending any specific one of those. I think that the ability to kind of filter and edit images is generally a useful tool for expression. For that specifically, I'm not familiar with the study that you're referring to, but we did make it so that we're not recommending this type of content to teens.
I made no reference to a study, to court documents that revealed your knowledge of the impact of these types of filters on young people generally, young girls in particular.
Senator, I disagree with that characterization. I think that there have been hypotheses.
Court documents?
I haven't seen any document that says
okay,
that,
Mr. Zuckerberg, my time is up. I hope that you hear what is being offered to you and are prepared to step up and do better. I know this Senate committee is going to do our work to hold you to greater account. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Tillis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. I don't feel like I'm going to have an opportunity to ask a lot of questions, so I'm going to reserve the right to submit some for the record. But I have heard, we've had hearings like this before. I've been in the Senate for 9 years. I've heard hearings like this before. I've heard horrible stories about people who have died, committed suicide, been embarrassed. Every year, we have an annual flogging every year. And what materially has occurred over the last 9 years? Do any of you all, just yes or no question, do any of y'all participate in an industry consortium trying to make this fundamentally safe across platforms? Yes or no, Mr. Zuckerberg?
Yes. There's a variety of organizations
Do you
that we
participate in
work. Which organizations?
I should say, does anyone here not participate in an industry? I actually think it would be immoral for you all to consider it a strategic advantage to keep safe or to keep private something that would secure all these platforms to avoid this sort of problem. Do you all agree with that? That anybody that would be saying you want ours because ours is the safest and these haven't figured out the secret sauce, that you as an industry realize this is an existential threat to you all if we don't get it right, right? I mean, you've got to secure your platforms. You got to deal with this. Do you not have an inherent mandate to do this? Because it would seem to me if you don't, you're going to cease to exist. I mean, we could regulate you out of business if we wanted to. And the reason I'm saying it may sound like a criticism. It's not a criticism. I think we have to understand that there should be an inherent motivation for you to get this right, or Congress will make a decision that could potentially put you out of business. Here's the reason I have a concern with that, though. I just went on the internet while I was listening intently to all the other members speaking, and I found a dozen different platforms outside the United States, 10 of which are in China, 2 of which are in Russia. Their daily average subscriber or active membership numbers in the billions. Well, people say you can't get on China's version of TikTok. It took me one quick search on my favorite search engine to find out exactly how I could get an account on this platform today. And so the other thing that we have to keep in mind, I come from technology. I could figure out, ladies and gentlemen, I could figure out how to influence your kid without them ever being on a social media platform. I can randomly send text and get a bite and then find out an email address and get compromising information. It is horrible to hear some of these stories, and I have shared and I've had these stories occur in my hometown down in North Carolina. But if we only come here and make a point today and don't start focusing on making a difference, which requires people to stop shouting and start listening and start passing language here, the bad actors are just going to be off our shores. I have another question for you all. How many people roughly, if you don't know the exact numbers, okay, roughly how many people do you have looking 24 hours a day at these horrible images? And just go real quick with an answer down the line and filtering it out.
It's most of the 40,000 about people who work on safety and security.
again?
We have 2,300 people all over the world.
Okay.
We have 40,000 trust and safety professionals around the world.
We have approximately 2,000 people dedicated to trust and safety and content moderation.
Our platform is much smaller than these folks. We have hundreds of people, and it's looking at content, and 15% of our workforce.
I'm only mentioning these people have a horrible job. Many of them experience, they have to get counseling for all the things they see. We have evil people out there. And we're not going to fix this by shouting past or talking past each other. We're going to fix this by every one of y'all being at the table and hopefully coming closer to what I heard one person say, supporting a lot of the good bills, like one that I hope Senator Blackburn mentions when she gets a chance to talk. But guys, if you're not at the table and securing these platforms, you're going to be on it. And the reason why I'm not okay with that is that if we ultimately destroy your ability to create value and drive you out of business, the evil people will find another way to get to these children. And I do have to admit, I don't think my mom's watching this one, but there is good. We can't look past good that is occurring. My mom, who lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and I talked yesterday, and we talked about a Facebook post that she made a couple of days ago. We don't let her talk to anybody else. That connects my 92-year-old mother with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. That lets a kid who may feel awkward in school to get into a group of people and relate to people. Let's not throw out the good because we haven't all together focused on rooting out the bad. Now, I guarantee you, I could go through some of your governance documents and find a reason to flog every single one of you because you didn't place the emphasis on it that I think you should. But at the end of the day, I find it hard to believe that any of you people started this business, some of you in your college dorm rooms, for the purposes of creating the evil that is being perpetrated on your platforms. But I hope that every single waking hour, you're doing everything you can to reduce it. You're not going to be able to eliminate it. And I hope that there are some enterprising young tech people out there today that are going to go to parents and say, ladies and gentlemen, your children have a deadly weapon. They have a potentially deadly weapon, whether it's a phone or a tablet. You have to secure it. You can't assume that they're going to be honest and say that they're 16 when they're 12. We all have to recognize that we have a responsibility to play, and you guys are at the tip of the spear. So I hope that we can get to a point to where we are moving these bills. If you got a problem with them, state your problem, let's fix it. No is not an answer. And know that I want the United States to be the beacon for innovation, to be the beacon for safety, and to prevent people from using other options that have existed since the internet has existed to exploit people. And count me in as somebody that will try and help out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Next is Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses today. Mr. Zuckerberg, I want to begin by just asking a simple question, which is, do you want kids to use your platform more or less?
Well, we don't want people under the age of 13 using.
Do you want teenagers 13 and up to use your platform more or less?
Well, we would like to build a product that is useful and that people want to use more.
My time is going to be limited, so it's just, do you want them to use it more or less? Teenagers 13 to 17 years old, do you want them using Meta products more or less?
I'd like them to be useful enough that they want to use them more.
You want them to use it more. I think herein we have one of the fundamental challenges. In fact, you have a fiduciary obligation, do you not, to try to get kids to use your platform more?
It depends on how you define that. We obviously are a business.
I'm sorry, Mr. Zuckerberg, our time is, it's self-evident that you have a fiduciary obligation to get your users, including users under 18, to use and engage with your platform more rather than less, correct?
Over the long term, but in the near term, we often take a lot of steps, including we made a change to show less videos that on the platform that reduced amount of time by more than 50 million
Okay,
hours.
but if your shareholders ask you, Mark, I wouldn't, Mr. Zuckerberg here, but your shareholders might be on a first-name basis with you. Mark, are you trying to get kids to use Meta products more or less? You'd say more, right?
Well, I would say that over the long term, we're trying to create the most
I mean,
value
let's look.
possible.
So the 10K you file with the SEC, a few things I want to note. Here are some quotes, and this is a filing that you signed, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Our financial performance has been and will continue to be significantly determined by our success in adding, retaining, and engaging active users. Here's another quote. If our users decrease their level of engagement with our products, our revenue, financial results, and business may be significantly harmed. Here's another quote. We believe that some users, particularly younger users, are aware of and actively engaging with other products and services similar to or as a substitute for ours. It continues, in the event that users increasingly engage with other products and services, we may experience a decline in use and engagement in key demographics or more broadly, in which case our business would likely be harmed. You have an obligation as the chief executive to encourage your team to get kids to use your platform more.
Senator,
Fundamental,
I think this is...
is that not self-evident? You have a fiduciary
Senator,
obligation to your shareholders to get kids to use your platform more.
I think that the thing that's not intuitive is the direction is to make the products more useful, so that way people want to use them more. We don't give the teams running the Instagram feed or the Facebook feed a goal to increase the amount of time that people spend.
Yeah, but you don't dispute, and your 10K makes clear you want your users engaging more and using more the platform. And I think this gets to the root of the challenge, because it's the overwhelming view of the public, certainly in my home state of Georgia, and we've had some discussions about the underlying science, that this platform is harmful for children. I mean, you are familiar with, and not just your platform, by the way, social media in general. 2023 report from the Surgeon General about the impact of social media on kids' mental health, which cited evidence that kids who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media have double the risk of poor mental health outcomes, including depression and anxiety. Are you familiar with that Surgeon General report and the underlying study?
I read the report, yes.
Do you dispute it?
No, but I think it's important to characterize it correctly. I think what he was flagging in the report is that there seems to be a correlation, and obviously the mental health issue is very important, so it's something that needs to be studied
we know.
further.
The thing is, that's everyone knows there's a correlation. Everyone knows that kids who spend a lot of time, too much time on your platforms are at risk. And it's not just the mental health issues. I mean, let me ask you another question. Is your platform safe for kids?
I believe it is, but there's an important difference between correlation and causation.
because we're not going to be able to get anywhere. We want to work in a productive, open, honest, and collaborative way with the private sector to pass legislation that will protect Americans, that will protect American children above all, and that will allow businesses to thrive in this country. If we don't start with an open, honest, candid, realistic assessment of the issues, we can't do that. The first point is you want kids to use the platform more. In fact, you have an obligation to. But if you're not willing to acknowledge that it's a dangerous place for children, the internet is a dangerous place for children, not just your platform, isn't it? Isn't the internet a dangerous place for children?
I think it can be. Yeah, there's both great things that people can do, and there are harms that we need to work to
Yeah,
mitigate.
it's a dangerous place for children. There are families here who have lost their children. There are families across the country whose children have engaged in self-harm, who have experienced low self-esteem, who have been sold deadly pills on the internet. The internet's a dangerous place for children, and your platforms are dangerous places for children. Do you agree?
I think that there are harms that we need to work to mitigate.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to, I think overall
Why not?
there-
Why not? Why not just acknowledge it? Why do we have to do the very
Well,
careful
I
code?
disagree with the characterization
Which character,
that you have.
that the internet's a dangerous place for children?
I think you're trying to characterize our products as inherently dangerous, and I think that
Inherent
first-
or not, your products are places where children can experience harm. They can experience harm to their mental health. They can be sold drugs. They can be preyed upon by predators. They're dangerous places. And yet, you have an obligation to promote the use of these platforms by children. And look, all I'm trying to suggest to you, Mr. Zuckerberg, and my time is running short, is that in order for you to succeed, you and your colleagues here, we have to acknowledge these basic truths. We have to be able to come before the American people, the American public, the people in my state of Georgia, and acknowledge the internet is dangerous, including your platforms. There are predators lurking. There are drugs being sold. There are harms to mental health that are taking a huge toll on kids' quality of life. And yet, you have this incentive, not just you, Mr. Zuckerberg, all of you have an incentive to boost, maximize use, utilization, and engagement. And that is where public policy has to step in to make sure that these platforms are safe for kids. So kids are not dying, so kids are not overdosing, so kids are not cutting themselves or killing themselves because they're spending all day scrolling instead of playing outside. And I appreciate all of you for your testimony. We will continue to engage as we develop this legislation. Thank you.
Senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to each of you for coming. And I know some of you had to be subpoenaed to get here, but we do appreciate that you all are here. Mr. Chu, I want to come to you first. We've heard that you're looking at putting a headquarters in Nashville and likewise in Silicon Valley and Seattle. And what you're going to find probably is that the welcome mat is not going to be rolled out for you in Nashville like it would be in California. There are a lot of people in Tennessee that are very concerned about the way TikTok is basically building dossiers on our kids, the way they are building those on their virtual you. And also that information is held in China, in Beijing, as you responded to Senator Blumenthal and I last year in reference to that question. And we also know that a major music label yesterday said they were pulling all of their content off your site because of your issues on payment, on artificial intelligence, and because of the negative impact on our kids' mental health. So we will see how that progresses. Mr. Zuckerberg, I want to come to you. We have just had, Senator Blumenthal and I, of course, have had some internal documents and emails that have come our way. One of the things that really concerned me is that you referred to your young users in terms of their lifetime value of being roughly $270 per teenager. And each of you should be looking at these kids. Their T-shirts they're wearing today say, I'm worth more than $270. We've got some standing up in those T-shirts. Now, And some of the children from our state, some of the children, the parents that we have worked with, just to think, whether it is Becca Schmidt, David Mollick, Sarah Flatt, Annalie Schote, would you say that life is only worth $270? What could possibly lead you? I mean, I listened to that. I know you're a dad. I'm a mom. I'm a grandmom. And how could you possibly even have that thought? It is astounding to me. And I think this is one of the reasons that states, 42 states, are now suing you because of features that they consider to be addictive, that you are pushing forward. And in the emails that we've got from 2021 that go from August to November, there is the staff plan that is being discussed. And Antigone Davis, Nick Clegg, Sheryl Sandberg, Chris Cox, Alex Schultz, Adam Masseri are all on this chain of emails on the well-being plan. And then we get to one, Nick did email Mark for emphasis to emphasize his support for the package, but it sounds like it lost out to various other pressures and priorities. See, this is what bothers us. Children are not your priority. Children are your product. Children you see as a way to make money. And children, protecting children in this virtual space, you made a conscious decision. Even though Nick Clegg and others were going through the process of saying, this is what we do. These documents are really illuminating. And it just shows me that growing this business, expanding your revenue, what you were going to put on those quarterly filings, that was the priority. The children were not. It's very clear. I want to talk with you about the pedophile ring because that came up earlier, and the Wall Street Journal reported on that. And one of the things that we found out was after that became evident, then you didn't take that content down. And it was content that showed that teens were for sale and were offering themselves to older men. And you didn't take it down because it didn't violate your community standards. Do you know how often a child is bought or sold for sex in this country? Every 2 minutes. Every 2 minutes, a child is bought or sold for sex. That's not my stat. That is a TBI stat. Now, finally, this content was taken down after a congressional staffer went to Meta's global head of safety. So would you please explain to me and to all these parents why explicit predatory content does not violate your platform's terms of service or your community standards?
Sure, Senator. Let me try to address all of the things that you just said. It does violate our standards. We work very hard to take it down.
Didn't take it down.
We've reported, I think it's more than 26 million examples of this kind of content.
Didn't take it down until a congressional staffer brought it up.
It may be that in this case we made a mistake and missed something.
I think you make a lot of mistakes.
But we
so
have
let's
we have
move
leading
on.
teams that
I want to
identify more
talk
than
with you about your Instagram creators program and about the push. We found out through these documents that you actually are pushing forward because you want to bring kids in early. You see these younger teenagers as valuable but an untapped audience, quoting from the emails, and suggesting teens are actually household influencers to bring their younger siblings into your platform, into Instagram. Now, how can you ensure that Instagram creators, your product, your program, does not facilitate illegal activities when you fail to remove content pertaining to the sale of minors. And it is happening once every 2 minutes in this country.
Senator, our tools for identifying that kind of content are industry leading. That doesn't mean we're perfect. There are definitely issues that we have, but we continue to invest a ton in it.
Yes, there are a lot that is slipping through. It appears that you're trying to be the premier sex trafficking
Of course
site
not, Senator.
in this country.
Senator, that's ridiculous.
No, it
Senator,
is not ridiculous. You want to turn around and tell these people
content
that.
on our platforms, and we,
Why don't you take it down?
We do take it
We
down.
are here discussing.
We do
We
more
need
work to
you
take it
all
down
to
than-
work
than-
with
than-
us. No, you're not. You are not. And the problem is, we've been working on this. Senator Welch is over there. We've been working on this stuff for a decade. You have an army of lawyers and lobbyists that have fought us on this every step of the way. You work with NetChoice, the Cato Institute, Taxpayers Protection Alliance, and Chamber of Progress to actually fight our bipartisan legislation to keep kids safe online. So are you going to stop funding these groups? Are you going to stop lobbying against this and come to the table and work with us? Yes or no?
Senator, we have a...
Yes or no?
Of course we'll work with you on the legislation.
Okay,
I mean,
the
it's
door
been hard
is
to-
open. We've got all these bills. You need to come to the table. Each and every one of you need to come to the table. And you need to work with us. Kids are dying.
Senator Welch?
I want to thank my colleague, Senator Blackburn, for her decade of work on this. I actually have some optimism. There is a consensus today that didn't exist, say, 10 years ago, that there is a profound threat to children, to mental health, to safety. There's not a dispute. That was in debate before. That's a starting point. Secondly, we're identifying concrete things that can be done in 4 different areas. One is industry standards. 2 is legislation. 3 are the courts. And then 4 is a proposal that Senator Bennett, Senator Graham, myself, and Senator Warren have to establish an agency, a governmental agency, whose responsibility would be to engage in this on a systematic, regular basis with proper resources. And I just want to go through those. I appreciate the industry standard decisions and steps that you've taken in your companies. But it's not enough, and that's what I think you're hearing from my colleagues. Like, for instance, where there are layoffs in it is in the trust and verify programs. That's alarming because it looks like there is a reduction in emphasis on protecting things. Like, you just added, Ms. Yacarino, 100 employees in Texas in this category. And how many did you have before?
The company is just coming through a significant restructuring. So we've increased the number of trust and safety employees and agents all over the world by at least 10% so far in the last 14 months. And we will continue to do so, specifically in Austin, Texas.
All right, Mr. Zuckerberg, my understanding is there have been layoffs in that area as well. There's added jobs there at Twitter, but at Meta, have there been reductions in that?
There have been across the board, not really focused on that area. I think our investment is relatively consistent over the last couple of years.
Right,
we invested almost $5 billion in this work last year, and I think this year will be on the same order of magnitude.
All right. And another question that's come up is when, to the horror of a user of any of your platforms, somebody has an image on there that's very compromising, often of a sexual nature. Is there any reason in the world why a person who wants to take that down can't have a very simple same-day response to have it taken down? I'll start with Twitter on that.
I'm sorry, Senator, I was taking notes. Could you repeat the question?
Well, there's a lot of examples of a young person finding out about an image that is of them and really compromises them and actually can create suicidal thoughts. And they want to call up or they want to send an email and say, take it down. I mean, why is it not possible for that to be responded to immediately?
Well, we all strive to take down any type of violative content or disturbing content immediately. At X, we have increased our capabilities with a two-step reporting process.
If I'm a parent or I'm a kid and I want this down, shouldn't there be methods in place where it comes down? You can see what the image is.
Yes.
An ecosystem-wide standard would improve and actually enhance the experience for users at all our platforms.
All right.
There actually is an organization that I think a number of the companies up here are a part of called Take It Down. It's some technology that we and a few others
All right,
built.
so you all are in favor of that, because that is going to give
exists.
some peace of mind to people, all right? It really, really matters. I don't have that much time, so we've talked about the legislation, and Senator Whitehouse had asked you to get back with your position on Section 230, which I'll go to in a minute. But I would welcome each of you responding as to your company's position on the bills that are under consideration in this hearing. All right? I'm just asking you to do that. Third, the court. This big question of Section 230. And today, I'm pretty inspired by the presence of the parents who have turned their extraordinary grief into action and hope that other parents may not have to suffer what for them is a devastating, for everyone, a devastating loss. Senator Whitehouse asked you all to get back very concretely about Section 230 and your position on that. But it's an astonishing benefit that your industry has that no other industry has. They just don't have to worry about being held accountable in court if they're negligent. So you've got some explaining to do, and I'm just reinforcing Senator Whitehouse's request that you get back specifically about that. And then finally, I want to ask about this notion, this idea of a federal agency who's resourced and whose job is to be dealing with public interest matters that are really affected by big tech. It's extraordinary what has happened in our economy with technology, and your companies represent innovation and success. But just as when the railroads were ascendant and were in charge and ripping off farmers because of practices they were able to get away with, just as when Wall Street was flying high, but there was no one regulating blue sky laws. We now have a whole new world in the economy. And Mr. Zuckerberg, I remember you testifying in the Energy and Commerce Committee, and I asked you your position on the concept of a federal regulatory agency. My recollection is that you were positive about that. Is that still the case?
I think it could be a reasonable solution. There are obviously pros and cons to doing that versus through the normal, the current structure of having different regulatory agencies focused on specific issues. Right. But because a lot of the things trade off against each other, like one of the topics that we talked about today is encryption, and that's obviously really important for privacy and security.
Right.
But
Can we just go down the line? I'm at the end, but thank you, Ms. Giacomino.
Senator, I think the industry initiative to keep those conversations going would be something X would be very, very proactive about. If you think about our support of the REPORT Act, the SHIELD Act, the Stop CSAM Act, our support of the Project Safe Childhood Act, I think our intentions are clear to participate and to lead here.
Yeah.
Senator, we support national privacy legislation, for example, so that sounds like a good idea. We just need to understand what it means.
All right. Mr. Spiegel?
Senator, we'll continue to work with your team, and we'd certainly be open to exploring the right regulatory body for big technology.
But the idea of a regulatory body is something that you can see has merit.
Yes, Senator.
And Mr. Sifrin?
Yeah, we're very open to working with you and our peers and anybody on helping make the internet a safer place. You know, I think you mentioned this is not a one-platform problem.
Right.
So we do look to collaborate with other companies and with nonprofits in the government.
Okay. I thank you all. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Welch. Well, we're going to conclude this hearing, and thank you all for coming today. You probably have your scorecard out there. You've met at least 20 members of this committee and have your own impressions of their questioning, their approach, and the like. But the one thing I want to make clear as chairman of this committee for the last 3 years is this was an extraordinary vote on an extraordinary issue. A year ago, we passed 5 bills unanimously in this committee. You heard all the senators. Every spot on the political spectrum was covered. Every single senator voted unanimously in favor of the 5 pieces of legislation we've discussed today. It ought to tell everyone who follows Capitol Hill and Washington a pretty stark message. We get it, and we live it. As parents and grandparents, we know what our daughters and sons and others are going through. They cannot cope. They cannot handle this issue on their own. They're counting on us as much as they're counting on the industry to do the responsible thing. And some will leave with impressions of our witnesses and the companies they represent that you're right as an American citizen. But you ought to also leave with the determination to keep the spotlight on us to do something, not just to hold a hearing, bring out a good, strong crowd of supporters for change, but to get something done. No excuses. No excuses. We've got to bring this to a vote. What I found in my time in the House and the Senate is that's the moment of reckoning. Speeches notwithstanding, press releases and the like. The moment of reckoning is when we call a vote on these measures. It's time to do that. I don't believe there's ever been a moment in America's wonderful history when a business or industry has stepped up and said, regulate us, put some legal limits on us. Businesses exist by and large to be profitable. And I think that we got to get behind that and say profitability at what cost. Senator Kennedy, a Republican colleague, said, is our technology greater than our humanity? I think that is a fundamental question that he asked. What I would add to it, are our politics greater than technology? We're going to find out. I want to thank a few people before we close up here. I've got several staffers who've worked so hard on this. Alexandra Gelber, thank you very much, Alexandra. Jeff Hansen, Scott Jorgensen. Last point I'll make, Mr. Zuckerberg, is just a little advice to you. I think your opening statement on mental health needs to be explained because I don't think it makes any sense. There is a parent in this room who's had a child that's gone through an emotional experience like this that wouldn't tell you and me they changed right in front of my eyes. They changed. They hold themselves up in their room. They no longer reached out to their friends. They lost all interest in school. These are mental health consequences that I think come with the abuse of this right to have access to this kind of technology. So I see my colleague said, you want to say a word?
I think it was a good hearing. I hope something positive comes from it. Thank you all for coming.
The hearing record is going to remain open for a week for statements, and questions may be submitted by senators by 5 p.m. on Wednesday. Once again, thanks to the witnesses for coming. The hearing stands adjourned.
you.